For 25 years I thought I knew my family perfectly. Until I found a box in the attic that shattered everything I thought I knew about who I really was. I need to tell this story because it's been 6 months and I still don't know how to fully process what I discovered. It's about my family, but it's not one of those typical family drama stories. This is something that literally changed my entire identity and the way I see the people I love the most in the world. First, let me give you some context about my family because it's important to understand the dynamic we had before everything fell apart. There are 5 of us. My parents, Maria and Carlos, my older sister Sandra who's 28, my brother Diego who's 26, and me, I'm 25. We were always super close. The kind of family that has religious Sunday dinners, goes on vacations together, celebrates every birthday in a big way. My parents have been married for 30 years and I always admired them as a couple. They still hold hands, joke around, support each other in everything. My mom is an elementary school teacher, super loving, the kind who always has cookies baking in the oven. My dad works as an accountant in a medium-sized company. He's calm but funny, the typical dad who tells bad jokes but is always there when you need him. Sandra is a psychologist, married, already has 2 little kids. Diego studied engineering and works at a tech startup. I'm the youngest, I work in digital marketing, and until recently I lived with my parents while saving up to buy my own apartment. The thing is, I always felt different from the rest. Not physically, we're all tan-skinned, average height with my dad's same brown eyes. But in personality and interests I was like the odd one out. Sandra and Diego were always super academic, straight-A students, organized, responsible. I was more creative, more rebellious, into art and music, things my parents considered impractical. They never rejected me but I always felt like they didn't fully get me. All through my childhood and teen years I had this weird feeling of not completely fitting in. Like when everyone was laughing at something and I didn't get the joke, or when my siblings were having super technical conversations and I was totally lost. I thought it was normal, every family has a black sheep, right? But there were little things that always caught my attention. Like the fact that I didn't have newborn hospital pictures, only from around 3 months and on. Or that whenever I asked about my birth, my parents gave vague answers or quickly changed the subject. Once, when I was about 15, I asked my mom why I didn't have newborn pictures like my siblings. She told me they were lost during a move, but I knew for a fact we had never moved since I was born. Another time, I found some health insurance documents where Sandra, Diego, and my parents appeared, but my name wasn't there. When I asked, my dad said they added me later in a separate renewal. It made sense but something felt off. The breaking point came 6 months ago. My parents decided to remodel the house and asked me to help clean out the attic. It was a Saturday morning. Sandra was with her kids. Diego had plans with his girlfriend so it was just me. My mom made me coffee and gave me a list of what to keep and what to throw away. My parents' attic was like a family museum. Boxes and boxes of photos, documents, vacation souvenirs, our old schoolwork, baby clothes, toys. It was nostalgic and fun going through everything. I'd been sorting for about 3 hours when I found a box hidden behind others in a corner. It was different. It had a lock and was wrapped in a plastic bag like they wanted to protect it from moisture. Curiosity got me. I forced the lock. It was old and opened easily. Inside were documents, photos, and letters. At first I thought they were important papers of my parents like wills or house deeds. But as I started going through them, my world collapsed. The first thing I saw was a birth certificate. But it wasn't the one I knew, though it had my full name and exact birth date. The parents listed were Elena Ramirez and father unknown. I stared at it for like 5 minutes not understanding. Why would my parents have a fake birth certificate of mine? Who was Elena Ramirez? I kept going and found more documents. Adoption papers dated when I was 4 months old. A letter from a social worker explaining that the biological mother had decided to give up the baby for adoption because she couldn't take care of him. But what really broke me were the photos. There were about 20 photos of a young girl, maybe 17 or 18, holding a baby. The baby was clearly me. Same birthmark on the arm, and in one photo you could see my name written on a hospital bracelet. The girl in the photos. God, it was like looking in a mirror. Same eyes, same face shape, same smile. It was obvious she was my biological mother. There were also handwritten letters from Elena to my parents, thanking them for adopting her baby, explaining that it was the best for everyone. In one letter she said she was a single mother at 17, the baby's father had abandoned her when he learned about the pregnancy, and she had no resources or family support to raise me. But the hardest one to read was a letter addressed to me for when I was older. She wrote that she loved me deeply but giving me a stable family was the greatest act of love she could do for me. That she hoped someday I could understand her decision and maybe, when I was an adult, we could meet. At the end of the letter was an address and a phone number, but they were from 25 years ago, so probably useless. I sat on the attic floor surrounded by all those papers, crying like I hadn't cried in years. Not exactly sadness, more like total emotional shock. For 25 years, my parents had lied to me about the most basic origin of my existence. It's not that being adopted was bad, but why hadn't they ever told me? Why invent a whole story about my birth? All those times I had asked about my early childhood and they avoided answering. All those moments I felt different from my family suddenly made perfect sense. I went downstairs holding the box. My parents were in the living room watching TV, totally relaxed, with no idea their son had just discovered his whole life was built on a lie. "Mom, Dad," I said with a shaky voice, "we need to talk." When they saw the box in my hands, their faces changed completely. My mom went pale, my dad jumped up from the couch. "Son," my dad started, but I cut him off. "When were you planning on telling me I'm adopted?" The silence was deafening. My mom started crying, my dad looked like someone had punched him. "How did you find that?" my mom asked. "It was in the attic, where you asked me to clean," I snapped. "The question isn't how I found it, but why you lied to me for 25 years. My dad sat down, covering his face with his hands. My mom tried to hug me, but I stepped back. "It's not what you think," she said. "Not what I think. Mom, here's my real birth certificate, the adoption papers, photos of my biological mother, letters explaining everything." "What part isn't what I think?" My dad looked up at me with red eyes. "Son, we've loved you as if you were our biological child from the very first day you came home. To us, you are our son. There's no difference." "But there is a difference," I yelled. "The difference is you lied to me my whole life. The difference is I have a biological mother I never knew about. The difference is my entire identity is a lie." My mom cried harder. "We didn't want you to feel different or less loved." "Really? Because guess what? I always felt different. My whole life I felt like I didn't belong. And you let me think there was something wrong with me instead of just telling me the truth." What followed was the hardest conversation of my life. Through tears and arguments, my parents told me the whole story. They had been trying for years to have a third child after Diego, but my mom had several miscarriages. When they had almost given up, a friend of my mom's who worked in social services told them about Elena, a pregnant teenager looking for a family for her baby. They met her during the pregnancy, and Elena specifically chose them after several interviews. She felt connected to my parents because they already had experience raising kids. In the last months of her pregnancy, Elena even stayed at our house sometimes because her own family had rejected her. My siblings met her, though they were too little to understand. When I was born, Elena held me at the hospital and spent the first 3 days with me. Then she signed the adoption papers and disappeared from our lives. "Did you ever hear from her again?" I asked. "She wrote a few letters in the first years asking about you, sending birthday greetings. But then she stopped contacting us. We think she moved on with her life," my dad explained. "And why didn't you ever tell me?" Here's where it got complicated. At first, they intended to tell me when I was older. But as time went on, they got used to me seeing them as my biological parents, and they thought telling me would only hurt me. Besides, my mom said, "You never directly asked if you were adopted. You asked questions about your birth, but we thought that was normal curiosity." But I did ask. About the photos, the documents, why I felt different, and you always gave excuses or changed the subject. "You're right," my dad admitted. "As time passed, it got harder to find the right moment. Then we thought maybe it was better you never knew." That conversation lasted about 4 hours. By the end, we were all emotionally and physically drained. I told them I needed time to process and went for a long walk. I walked for hours in the park near my house, trying to reorganize 25 years of memories under this new reality. When I came back, my siblings were there. My parents had told them everything. Sandra, being a psychologist, immediately went into therapist mode, analyzing the situation from every angle. Diego was angrier at my parents than I was. "Seriously? You never told him?" Diego snapped. "I actually remember a girl living with us when I was little, but I thought she was a cousin or something." "I had vague memories too," Sandra added. "But I was so young I thought I made them up." Turns out my siblings had known something was up when I was born, but were too young to understand, and later my parents never explained fully. "What are you going to do now?" Sandra asked. That was the big question. What do you do when you find out your whole life is a lie? How do you process that the people you trust most deceived you for decades? I decided to take time. I moved in with a friend temporarily to have space away from my family home. For weeks, I didn't speak to my parents. It sounds dramatic, but I needed to process without their influence. Sandra and Diego checked on me regularly but respected my need for distance. The hardest part was reorganizing my identity. For 25 years, I had built my sense of self thinking I was Maria and Carlos's biological son, Sandra and Diego's little brother. Suddenly, those foundations were gone. It's not that I stopped loving them, but the trust was broken. Every childhood memory now had a completely different context. After a month of individual therapy, Sandra helped me find a therapist. I decided I wanted to look for Elena, my biological mother. I hired a private investigator. With her full name, birth date, and the adoption documents, it wasn't too hard to find her. Elena Ramirez, now Elena Martinez, was living in another city 3 hours away. She married at 23, had 2 more kids, and worked as a nurse in a public hospital. The investigator gave me her contact info, but warned me to approach carefully since we didn't know if she wanted contact. I took another week to decide. Finally, I wrote her a letter explaining who I was and that I had found the adoption documents. I told her I'd respect it if she didn't want contact, but I'd love to meet if she was open to it. I included my phone number and email, then sent it off without really expecting a reply. 3 days later, my phone rang at 8 a.m. "Hello? Is this Miguel?" a nervous female voice asked. "Yes, this is Miguel. This is Elena. Elena Ramirez. Well, now Elena Martinez. I got your letter." My heart stopped. It was my biological mother's voice. "I can't believe you found me," she said, and I could hear she was crying. "I've thought of you every day for 25 years. That call lasted 2 hours. Elena told me her side of the story, which matched everything my adoptive parents had said. She explained it was the hardest decision of her life, but at 17, with no support or resources, giving me up was the only way to ensure I had a good life. "Did you ever regret it?" I asked. "Every day," she answered honestly. "But I never regretted giving you a family that could love and care for you the way I couldn't then." She told me she finished high school, studied nursing, married a wonderful man who knew her whole story, and had 2 more kids, a 15-year-old girl and a 12-year-old boy. "Do they know about me?" I asked. "Yes. They've always known they had an older brother who was adopted. I always hoped someday you'd want to meet us." We agreed to meet the following week. She'd come to my city and we'd have lunch in a neutral place. Meanwhile, my siblings convinced me to talk to my parents before meeting Elena. It had been 2 months since our confrontation, and according to Sandra and Diego, my parents were devastated. I agreed, but in neutral ground, a cafe near my job. When I saw them, they looked awful. They'd lost weight, had dark circles, my mom had clearly been crying a lot. Seeing the people I loved most like that broke my heart, but I was also angry because I felt they had done this to themselves. "Son," my dad said as soon as we sat down, "we want you to know we're so sorry. There's no excuse for lying to you all these years." "You're right," I said. "There's no excuse." My mom started crying immediately. "Can you forgive us?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. "I love you, you've been my parents for 25 years, but I don't know how to get past the fact you lied about something so fundamental." Another long, painful conversation followed. But this time it was different. I'd had time to process and they'd had time to reflect. My dad explained something that helped me understand them a little. "Son, when Elena placed you in our arms for the first time, it was like you were born that day. For us, that was the moment you became our child. Everything before felt irrelevant." "But it wasn't irrelevant to me," I said. "I had the right to know where I come from." "You're right," my mom admitted. "We were selfish. We wanted to be your only parents and thought telling you about Elena would make you love us less. That talk didn't fix everything, but it was the first step toward healing." I told them I had contacted Elena and was going to meet her. Their reaction was complex. They looked scared but also relieved that I was taking control. "Are you mad at us for not telling you about her earlier?" my mom asked. "Yes," I said. "But I'm angrier about the lies than the adoption itself." A week later, I met Elena in person. I recognized her instantly when she walked into the restaurant. It was like seeing an older female version of myself. Same gestures, same way of walking, even the same little head tilt when nervous. We hugged and cried right there at the entrance. "You look so much like I imagined," she said. We had lunch for 3 hours. Elena told me about her life, my half-siblings, her husband. She showed me family photos and explained my birth story from her perspective. She also told me about my biological father, something I hadn't even realized I wanted to know. "His name was Roberto," she said. "We were classmates in high school. When I told him about the pregnancy, he said it wasn't his problem and disappeared. I never heard from him again." She showed me a photo of him from high school. I didn't look like him at all. I definitely inherited everything from Elena. Did you ever want to look for him? I asked. No, she said firmly. Someone who abandons his child doesn't deserve to meet him later. During that lunch, Elena asked about my adoptive parents. She seemed genuinely interested. Were they good parents to you? She asked. Yes, I told her honestly. They were excellent parents. They loved me, supported me, gave me everything I needed. The only problem is, they lied about this. Elena nodded. I understand why you're angry, but I hope you can forgive them. When I chose them as your parents, it was because I saw they were good people who would love you unconditionally. That talk with Elena changed my perspective. I realized my adoptive parents hadn't acted out of malice. They acted out of love, though in a misguided way. Elena acted out of love by giving me up. And I was reacting out of hurt love, not hate. Elena and I agreed to stay in touch. She also invited me to meet her family when I felt ready. 2 weeks later, I called my parents and said I wanted us to go to family therapy together. The sessions were intense but necessary. With the therapist's help, we were able to talk about everything without attacking each other. The therapist helped us understand this was family trauma that affected everyone, not just me. My parents had also been carrying guilt and fear for 25 years. After 2 months of therapy, I moved back into the family home. Not because everything was solved, but because I wanted to rebuild our relationship from a place of total honesty. I also met Elena's family. Her kids, my half-siblings, welcomed me with open arms. Her husband was super kind and respectful. It was strange but beautiful to suddenly have another family that wanted me there without hesitation. Her daughter hugged me like she had known me forever, and her son asked me if he could call me Big Brother. Elena's husband shook my hand and told me, "Thank you for giving her peace after so many years." Driving home that night, I cried, not from pain this time but from relief. For the first time in my life, I felt complete. Like all the missing pieces of my identity finally clicked into place. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were awkward moments, difficult conversations, even setbacks in therapy. But slowly, I built a new balance. I had my adoptive parents who raised me with love, and my biological mother who gave me life and had never stopped loving me from afar. One day during a family session, I told my parents something that made my mom burst into tears. "You didn't give me life, but you gave me a life worth living. And I'll always be grateful for that. But I also need Elena in my life now because she's part of who I am." And my dad, who usually struggles with emotions, simply said, "Then let's make room for her. The more love, the better." Today, 6 months after opening that box in the attic, my world looks completely different. I have 2 families that, against all odds, are learning to coexist. I've discovered parts of myself I never understood, and I've started to forgive, not just my parents but also myself for the years I felt broken. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this: identity isn't something fixed. It's a puzzle that we keep building throughout our lives. Sometimes we're missing pieces, sometimes they don't seem to fit, but in the end, every piece, every truth, makes us who we are. And me? I'm not just Miguel, son of Maria and Carlos. I'm also Miguel, son of Elena. I am all of them and all of them are me. That's my story.